In the shattered history of the Westlands, the name Logain Ablar is etched in two conflicting truths. To some, he is a pretender, a false dragon who raised armies, spilled blood, and dared to claim the destiny of the Dragon Reborn. To others, he is a martyr, a man broken by the White Tower's gentling, a soul stripped of power only to find a greater purpose. Few truly understand the tragedy of his rise, the agony of his fall, and the quiet miracle of his awakening. He was hunted as a usurper, imprisoned as a threat, and stilled as a monster. But in the loss of everything he thought he wanted, he found the clarity to become something far greater than a king. This is not a tale of ambition or conquest. This is the untold redemption of Logain Ablar, a man who wore the crown of a pretender, only to learn that true glory lies not in ruling, but in protecting. In this first chronicle of his epic saga, we dissect his fateful rise as a false dragon, the catastrophic gentling that stripped him of his power and his ego, the agonizing stillness that forged his unbreakable resilience, and the quiet awakening that revealed the rot festering at the heart of the Black Tower. He was broken so that he might be remade. He was stripped so that he might see. He was forgotten so that he might save the very world that rejected him. Chapter 1. The False Dragon. Ambition twisted by destiny. Before the stillness, before the break, before the name Logain Ablar became synonymous with redemption, he was a man consumed by a vision of destiny, of power, of a crown that he believed was his by right. Like all false dragons, Logain was driven mad by the faint, twisted echo of the dragon's call, a fragment of the pattern's resonance that seeped into the minds of men who could channel, twisting their ambition into delusion, their power into conquest. Logain was not born a tyrant. He was born a man of uncommon strength, a channeler whose raw power marked him as something extraordinary from his youth. He felt the weight of the pattern, the stir of ancient destiny, and the call to save the world from the shadow. But he misread the signs. He mistook his own power for the dragon's mantle. He mistook the hunger for glory for the duty of a savior. And so he rose. He gathered followers, men and women who felt the same pull of power, the same longing for meaning. He marched across the Westlands, his banner raised, his army growing with every victory. He conquered cities, toppled lords, and declared himself the Dragon Reborn, not out of malice, but out of a twisted, desperate belief that he was the world's only hope. To Logain, his conquest was not tyranny. It was salvation. His bloodshed was not cruelty. It was the necessary cost of uniting the world against the Dark One. The White Tower saw him only as a threat. Any man who channeled was a danger. Any man who claimed the dragon's mantle was a pretender to be hunted, captured, and stilled. They did not see his confusion. They did not see his desperate courage. They saw only a madman with a sword and a crown, a man who needed to be broken before he destroyed the fragile peace of the light. The campaign against Logain was brutal. The Aes Sedai unleashed their full power, hunting him down like a beast, cornering him, and finally overwhelming him. In the end, he was captured. His army was scattered. His crown was torn from his head, and the White Tower delivered its final, cruel sentence, gentling, the permanent, agonizing removal of a man's ability to channel, the severing of his connection to the one power, the destruction of the very thing that defined his identity. Chapter 2. The Agony of Stillness. Ego unmade, soul stripped. Bear gentling is not merely a physical punishment. It is a spiritual execution. For a man who can channel, the one power is as vital as breath, as inherent as sight. To be stilled is to have the air ripped from his lungs, the light torn from his eyes, the very fabric of his soul sliced away. It is a pain no words can describe, a despair so deep it drives most men to suicide within days. Logain Ablar should have died. He should have collapsed into the nothingness that claimed so many stilled men before him, but he did not. In that darkest moment, when his power was gone, his crown was lost, his name was reviled, and his life was over, something impossible happened. Logain Ablar began to wake. The gentling did not break him. It unmade him. It stripped away the ego of the pretender, the delusion of the conqueror, the hunger for glory that had blinded him for so long. It burned away the lies he had told himself, the false destiny he had claimed, the empty ambition that had driven his every step. What remained was not a king, not a pretender, not a warrior. What remained was a man stripped bare, vulnerable, broken, and infinitely stronger for it. The agony of stillness forged in him a resilience no army, no power, no glory could ever grant. He endured the endless emptiness of a life without the one power. And in that endurance, he found something he had never known before: purpose. During his captivity, confined to the shadows of the White Tower, Logain watched. He listened. He studied the world that had rejected him, the Aes Sedai, who feared men who channeled, the politics that blinded the light to the coming darkness. He saw the arrogance of the White Tower, the blindness of its leaders, the fragility of a world that refused to face the truth of the shadow's return. He saw the lies that bound the light, the fear that crippled its defenders, the rot that was already spreading through the foundations of the world's order. This was the gift of stillness, clarity. Stripped of power, he could see the truth he had never seen while wearing the crown. Freed from ambition, he could understand the danger he had never grasped while chasing glory. Weakened and vulnerable, he could perceive the rot he would have missed while wrapped in the delusion of his own greatness. He was no longer a pretender. He was a witness. Chapter 3. The Shadow of the Black Tower. A Corruption Unveiled. While Logain languished in the White Tower's captivity, a new power rose in the world: the Black Tower. A fortress of men who could channel, raised by Mazrim Taim, a man who claimed to serve the Dragon Reborn. To the world, the Black Tower was a symbol of hope, a gathering of the lost, a defense against the shadow. To Logain Ablar, it was a nightmare made flesh. Even in his stilled, weakened state, Logain felt the darkness festering at the heart of the Black Tower. He sensed the corruption, the fear, the compulsion that twisted the Ashaman. The name Tame had given his channelers into something brutal, something violent, something wrong. He saw that Taim was not building an army of protectors. He was forging a weapon of destruction, a blade aimed at the light, a tool of the shadow creeping into the heart of the world's last hope for men who channeled. Logain understood the truth no one else would see. Mazrim Taim was not a loyal servant of the dragon. He was a traitor, a pawn of the shadow, a man who was using the Black Tower to corrupt, to control, to destroy. Taim was repeating Logain's old mistake, but he was doing it with malice. Where Logain had been driven by delusion, Taim was driven by evil. Where Logain had sought to save the world, Taim sought to burn it down. This revelation forged in Logain a new resolve. He would not remain a captive, a stilled man, a forgotten pretender. He would escape the White Tower. He would find the Black Tower. He would confront the corruption eating away at the Ashaman. He would save the men Taim was destroying, not for power, not for glory, not for a crown, but because it was the right thing to do. Because he knew the pain of being twisted by power, and he would not let another generation suffer as he had. His stillness had given him clarity. His clarity had given him purpose. His purpose would drive him to confront the greatest threat the male channelers of the world had ever known. He was no longer fighting for a crown. He was fighting for souls. Chapter 4. The Pretender Reborn, a soul ready to redeem. When Logain finally escaped the White Tower, he was not the man who had been captured. He was a man reborn. Reborn in suffering, refined in stillness, awakened in truth. The ego of the pretender was gone. The hunger for glory was dead. The delusion of destiny was erased. In its place was a quiet, unshakable resolve to protect, to defend, to redeem, to take the pain he had endured, the power he had lost, the truth he had learned, and turn it into a shield for the men who had no one else to protect them. He knew the road ahead would be bloody. He knew he would face betrayal, fear, and violence. He knew he would be forced to fight a war within the Black Tower's walls, a war against Taim's corruption, a war against the shadow that had already infiltrated the last refuge of male channelers. He knew he would be outmatched, outmaneuvered, and outpowered. But he also knew he had something Taim would never have, the courage to choose mercy over conquest, purpose over power, sacrifice over glory. This was the first transformation of Logain Ablar from a false dragon who sought a crown to a redeemed soul who sought to serve. From a conqueror to a protector. From a pretender to a guardian. The world still saw him as a traitor, a madman, a failed pretender. But Logain Ablar knew the truth. He was no longer pretending. Logain Ablar's journey as a pretender is over. His suffering, his stillness, his captivity have forged him into a weapon of a different kind, a weapon of mercy, of resilience, of redemption. He walks toward the Black Tower not as a conqueror, but as a savior, not as a king, but as a shield. In the chapters to come, we will trace his covert infiltration of the Black Tower, the grassroots formation of his loyalist faction, the quiet resistance against Tayyim's dread reign, and the brutal tactical liberation that would purify the Ashaman from corruption. We will dissect how a stilled man's resilience became the moral backbone of the Black Tower, and how Logain Ablar reclaimed the soul of the male channelers from the shadow's grasp. The false dragon is dead. In his place stands a man ready to redeem the world that once rejected him.